To create a Center for 20th Century Studies in 1968 was a quite bold act. The Center for 20th Century Studies was one of the four pillars that UW-Milwaukee was built upon. It was founded then as a study of contemporary literature and the arts, but it was also making a claim implicitly to be studying a century that hadn't yet arrived, or at least to be studying a part of a century that hadn't yet arrived. C20, as it was never called, it was always referred to as the Center. And so the Center organized a series of 6 international conferences about film studies and the beginning of film studies. So that really took up the focus of a lot of the 70s and 80s. Kathy Woodward became the director in 1981, I believe, and directed the Center for the last 2 decades of the 20th century. And she continued that focus, but then began to expand it to include questions of gender, questions of performance studies, and questions of aging, which was one of the things that she herself was interested in as a scholar. There are hundreds of humanities centers now. There were a handful in 1968. And as a result of the fact that there were so few, the center was able to have access to great artists, really important critics, and theorists. So someone like John Cage came to the center. Clement Greenberg, the great art historian, came to the center. Great poets, UNESCO was here. Laurie Anderson, avant-garde rock musician, if rock musician is the word, the avant-garde musician, was here early on. I mean, there are critical theorists like Baudrillard, Lyotard, and so forth, Fred Jameson. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Center for 20th Century Studies was also to remind people of how remarkable that center was from its inception.
I feel deeply indebted to the center because I feel like it made my career. 40 years ago, in 1978, I saw an advertisement for an external fellowship at the center and I applied. They invited me to speak at a conference, a mini conference at the center in April of 1979. There's a small dinner for a small number of people, I don't know, at some restaurant that is no longer in Milwaukee. And I end up sitting next to Stephen Heath, who I knew of because he was pretty famous. And he said, "Do you have a book project?" And I knew that the answer had to be yes, even though the answer was truly no. So I said, yes. And he said, "Well, if you could get me a proposal within the next 3 days, I'll look at it because I'm editing a book series." So I went back to Oxford, Ohio, where I lived, and within 24 hours I produced a book proposal of a book I'd never thought about writing before that moment on psychoanalysis and feminism. I tell this story because what was produced was a book called The Daughter's Seduction, which was published in 1982. I had to write the book and then it had to be published, which completely made my career. And it wouldn't have happened had I not gone to the Center for 20th Century Studies. It was the one place that really gave important moral support to faculty of the humanities doing research. It's the one place where that seemed to really matter, that we weren't just here because we were teachers. So that's the thing that's been really important about the center, is that a place that says that the intellectual work and the exploratory, the intellectual exploration that faculty of the humanities does feels important.
When I came here in 1994, the Center for 20th Century Studies was this place that people could come and have a kind of extraordinary opportunity as fellows or as speakers to be in an environment where innovative thought in the humanities could find a place. I talked to Kathleen Woodward about the possibility of organizing some kind of event here that would not just be about animals in history, but would be more multidisciplinary. So I proposed that. She was positive about the idea. It was a little bit strange because I wasn't a faculty member. To have a proposal come from outside the faculty and actually outside the tenured faculty was a little, it was, I hate to say it, but I think it was actually unprecedented. The center was able to support my work because they focused on my research rather than my status at the university. I found this to be a fantastic intellectual home on campus where I might not have in a department. The conference was strange because the deal with quote-unquote animal studies at that point was that it seemed to be people working in lots of different places by themselves, and they hadn't really had an opportunity to meet and talk yet. A lot of the people who showed up for this event ended up being sort of key figures in the development of the field.
So really, in celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Center for 20th Century Studies, we're celebrating a kind of remarkable innovation in the study of literature, culture, arts, and society, an innovation that radically claimed that the study of the present and the study of the future was as vital as the study of the recent and distant past.